Welcome to Sheth Marketing Academy. This lecture is focused on how to differentiate using marketing tactics and marketing programs. Differentiation is a key concept in marketing. It actually goes back to economics, and an economist called Clark articulated that in a commodity business like agricultural commodities, differentiation is very important in order to gain what he called differential advantage. This one was further propagated by a major theorist in marketing, and he also advocated, Roe Alderson was his name, that the key function of marketing is to create a differential advantage for the company and its products and offerings. But the real articulation came from a major scholar at Harvard University by the name of Theodore Levitt, and he wrote always very classic papers in Harvard Business Review, and one of his papers talked about you can differentiate anything. As I read that paper back again several times, I find it's one of the more meaningful papers he ever wrote, along with the first paper that he wrote called Marketing Myopia, for which he became famous. What I'm going to talk about is 7 different ways we can differentiate using marketing practices, marketing tactics, and marketing programs. In my view, essence of marketing is to create and sustain differential advantage for the company and its offerings. And the best way to create differential advantage is to understand market needs, wants, and aspirations or desires, as well as its money, time, and expertise as constraints on those needs, wants, and desires. The 7 ways to differentiate are the traditional 4 P's of marketing: product, price, place, promotion, but there are 3 more P's that I have added, which includes process, people, and purpose. So, we will go through this journey of showing how companies have used these 7 P's of marketing essentially to differentiate themselves or to gain a differential competitive advantage. So, let us start with product differentiation. This is the most common thinking. In fact, in economics, Ed Chamberlain came out with the argument that in a typical commodity business, price is the only determinant of market behavior, and therefore you will have the lowest price as the way to gain tremendous market share advantage. He challenged the traditional neoclassical thinking and came out with the idea that one can use technology as a way of differentiating in the market and gain what he call a monopolistic competition advantage, which means you command above average prices in the marketplace. So, product differentiation is pretty much the standard literature. So, let us review specific ways companies have used product differentiation to gain a differential advantage. The most common one, of course, is patent rights and more broadly intellectual property rights. Prescription drugs, this is the most common strategy they have used in pharmaceutical industry, and one of the better examples would be the Lipitor, which is a anti-cholesterol medicine that obviously the company has made billions of dollars over its life cycle. So, you gain a competitive advantage and protect that advantage by law, essentially by getting a monopoly position. Of course, Apple is the same story now in technology. Both the iPhone, the iPad has so much proprietary technology, and you have seen recently actually litigation being filed against Samsung for copying that, and Samsung also filing the countersuit against Apple, just so that you have this very much intellectual property right wars taking place between these 2 companies who are competing on a global basis. The second one is ingredient. Specific ingredient is unique to you and nobody else has access to that ingredient, and this typically happens in fragrances. The way you mix in perfumes, for example, gives you enormous advantage. Very much flavors are the most common thing in food and beverages. All of these things, for example, even things like Oreo cookie, which is the two black things on the outside with white filling inside, 100 years old brand name. It's all about the flavor and the ingredients inside that makes the difference. And of course, spices is another major mechanism to create a differential advantage. Indian curry, for example, or a cinnamon bun, for example, as a whole company, where cinnamon spice and the smell makes all the difference in gaining a competitive advantage. I will add here one more thing, and that is packaging and design are equally important. To me, it's a part of product differentiation, maybe through intellectual property rights, etc. The next area that I've identified is secret recipe. This is very common in cake mixes, for example, in making cookies, for example. Krispy Kreme donut believes in this stuff, that they have a very recipe that nobody can duplicate. Confectionery, I've seen this again and again across all candy makers, especially hard candy makers, which are based on sugar and corn syrup. Also, surprisingly, in chocolates. Europeans lead the way in chocolates more so than the Americans. We tend to lead a lot more in the candy business for whatever reason. And of course, Coca-Cola as a company is famous for its secret formula or the secret recipe. Last area where you can have product differentiation as the key strategy is branding the commodities. So when you are in a commodity business like sugar or salt, a branded product gains competitive advantage. The best example I can give you is bottled water. The trend began by a French company, Perrier is the brand name, and today we see worldwide movement where the water either taken from the well or a river in many places or a municipality water is more and more being bought and sold as bottled water, as filtered water with brand names such as Aquafina or Dasani. There are so many brands, hundreds of these brands worldwide you can find. So here is a commodity which is a free good that is converted into a commercial opportunity through primarily branding. And of course, in industrial markets, one can think about nylon offered by DuPont. DuPont always has done a great job of inventing a new technology such as nylon, then polyester, more Kevlar, and branding the product category which is then identified with DuPont. I find the same thing true about diamonds. Diamonds have been so far unbranded. Surprising to me, they are such an expensive product, but they behave like a commodity, and De Beers, which is the largest distributor of this in the world, actually has begun to now put an identification mark, a branding mark on the diamond to assure its quality by and large. The second area for differentiation is price. This is where the economists talked quite a lot about pricing, such as things like psychological pricing, when you price at 99 cents versus $1, $4.99 versus $5. Those are the kinds of things, but I think one can go deeper into this area by showing how companies have used pricing to differentiate themselves. The best examples are anything that's no frills. When the existing industry offers things which are bundled with lots of services in terms of pre-purchase, post-purchase like refund policies, etc., you come out with a no-frill strategy, unbundle all those value-add services and strictly go for the product at its offering and a price. Airlines have done that very, very well. Southwest Airlines began like that in America, but the best example today in the world may be Ryanair out of Ireland and UK, for example. I think that's very key to figure out. And of course, Aldi Foods, which is a German company, has done phenomenally well by offering very affordable products, mostly in its own brand names quite often in fact, but no frills. You have to bring your own bag, you have to bag your own grocery, you have to carry your own stuff as opposed to a regular supermarket. Opposite of no frills is bundled offerings, where you offer multiple products into a single price point, or you give discount because of the bundling. We have seen this as called a triple play. The telephone companies offering the broadband as well as the cable or video services, Cable companies offering the same way a broadband service, an internet service, as well as the voice service. We have seen this thing in banking, where you have a banking, brokerage and life insurance all bundled together, or at least you have a relationship manager that says we can offer you together as a price package. And of course, in casualty property insurance business, automobile companies such as State Farm, Allstate also offer you now a home insurance policy, and any recreational vehicles like a boat, for example, or a motorcycle. This is very, very common. So, bundling is a second major way within price differentiation, how to differentiate yourself. The third one is private labels. Of course, private labels have been historically always there. Mostly store brands, A&P as a supermarket got organized around that. Sears, the largest retailer at one time, also got organized around strictly offering their own brands. And of course, I would say the oldest of these retailer has been Marks and Spencer. Marks and Spencer has done a fantastic job out of UK to create label as a quality assurance when manufacturers were not scale oriented, did not have branding of their own products. They were basically small suppliers and they did not have the credibility, so the retailer offered that. So, today the biggest change is not just store name like Sears, but separate brand names. For example, Kenmore is a brand name owned by Sears in appliances, the largest in America, and neither General Electric nor Whirlpool, which makes for them, or any other brand can compete against them. They still have the largest market share. And Sears has probably similar brand names for Craftsman tools, lawnmowers, just goes on. So, one can create a private label as a offering which is probably more a value offering, maybe even a quality offering to compete against national brands. And of course, the most common strategy that is used is to offer the same product into three categories, what is called good, better and best. Airlines do it all the time between first class, business class, economy class, or now they create this comfort economy class as a one more combination, mostly some product variation, but most of that is basically price variation. Railroads have done the same thing. If you go to Eurail in Europe, for example, you have a first class. Traditionally, you always had a first class, air conditioned class, second class, third class as it used to be called in most countries which are ex-colonies of British economy by and large. So, even today in Europe you see different classes in railroads for going from one place to the other, and of course, in hotels we can see the same thing. Most hotel groups now would have super luxury brands such as, let us say, Ritz-Carlton, would have Marriott Suites, which basically owns now Ritz-Carlton, would have Courtyard by Marriott at a lower price point. So, in hotel motels you always have this phenomenon of good, better, best as different pricing mechanism to serve different market segments. The third area is differentiating using place or channels. The fundamental difference seems to be whether you want to be an OEM supplier or you also want to serve the end user market. Very common in the automotive sector. Automotive component makers, automotive suppliers such as tire companies like a Michelin, Goodyear for example, Bridgestone, not only offer tire to the automobile makers, but also have retail brands. And they do a lot of advertising on the retail side. So, you have two different markets to reach, not only the original tires, but also the replacement market. It is true for battery companies, it is true for steering wheel, it is true for mirrors, I mean anything you can imagine in the car. And most importantly now, the biggest component in the automobiles are electronics. And the same electronics that are embedded in the car can be offered separately to the end user market through alternate distribution systems. Consumer versus institutional is another major difference. You are a consumer company, but you also offer your products through institutional markets, as Kimberly Clark does a great job for the same sanitary things like towels and tissues. They will offer that through let us say hospital groups. They will offer through universities. They are all institutional markets in some fashion. And I have seen the institutional market in appliances quite a lot, where there are rental places. So, not only you buy your appliances, but there will be a distributor who offers on a rental basis. And also property management companies, large condos and large apartment complexes will have lots of appliances, especially washer, dryer, refrigerator, etc., which goes into the rental market. We have seen the same thing in the automobile. You have the automobile market, but you have the rental car market, and you also have the corporate fleet market. So, one can easily expand by using alternate distribution systems. More recently, what we see is the traditional brick and mortar, a physical retail store outlets essentially now becoming also online. So, you take Barnes and Noble in book distribution, a bookstore essentially, and you see primarily Amazon on the other side. Amazon has gone a tremendous advantage primarily because they have been strictly online, and the whole operations are very differently organized than you had the physical stores as Barnes and Noble has, but those are the two channels and you can expand both ways. Clearly Barnes and Noble has to go online as they are doing it, and it is a matter of time before Amazon will announce that we will have our own stores, probably located just like Apple has done with its products, Disney has done with its products, for example, as specialty retailing, something where the consumers can experience the Amazon experience now as they experience the Starbucks experience. So, you can have multiple channels to go after the market as a way of differentiating yourself. Distributor versus direct is a very common debate among all industrial product makers. So, for example, 3M company, which has been primarily organized around distributors. Home Depot would be a major distributor for them, Sears may be another distributor for them, Target may be a third one. But often you find an end user company buys so much that you need to create a direct account. It is called a key account, sometimes it is called a key global account management system, etc., and that is very key debate in the companies. Amway distributors is another model the same way, where you have a multi-level selling, but you reach to the lowest common denomination, which is the end consumer in some fashion, in creating multiple channels of distribution. The debates about going through distributor versus direct is intense in a B2B market. I remember, for example, Group Schneider, which owns Square D company in America, North America. The Square D company always went to the customers at the end, because they sell big transformers and switch breakers for all the utility companies and large enterprises. The question therefore is that should you use a distributor like a Graybar and a Grainger, and if so, what happens to your sales organization and what happens to your margins? Typical debates. Finally, they decided that in order to differentiate themselves, they will have to do both channels by and large. And the last area I will talk about in terms of place differentiation is franchise versus company stores. McDonald's is mostly franchise, but Starbucks is company owned stores. Each one feels very strongly that the one approach would be better to differentiate themselves than the other approach. Both may be right. Primarily, there is no right or wrong answer in my view. And you can see the same thing in gas stations. You have the oil companies, what are called integrated oil companies, who have a complete value chain from exploration to drilling, in fact, to refining to distribution, will have their own brand names such as Exxon, Mobil, Texaco, whatever the names are, but they also sell the same gasoline through independent distributors that go to private label gas stations or a regional gas station, such as in my area called QT, for example. It is very possible. It is not the company label, but some other label, and you can differentiate on that basis. The next area in marketing we talk about is promotion, which is advertising, sales promotion, and selling in general. Best area around here is positioning. How do you position yourself? I have a separate lecture on positioning, but I will talk about here the differentiation is the way you position. So, for example, nano car that Tata Motors in India innovated, very affordable car. The question is, do you position as a very small car, fuel efficient, or as more taking market away from the motorcycle and scooters. From a two-wheeler market, are you making a four-wheeler more safer, better car, etc., more protection against rain in countries like India or tropical nations by and large, or is it really a cheaper, inferior, low-cost automobile? That makes all the difference. Big ballpoint pen did the same thing. When ballpoint pen was invented, the debate was whether it is a inferior pen. Fountain pens used to be a jewelry item almost in those days, or should it be a superior pencil, an ink writing pencil? And the way they positioned it made all the difference in the way they created a market for themselves. And of course, jingles and slogans are very key in terms of differentiating yourself. I mean, I'm sure you remember some of the jingles. Once you hear them, you can't get it out of your mind even. They're so good by and large. Second way to differentiate using promotion now is social media. None of us really saw the power of social media. We all know word of mouth communication. I mean, that's an old literature in marketing. But now using that and amplifying to the level, reaching the world through the internet and the social media platforms, is just incredible. And more companies are using social media for both viral marketing, customer engagement, as well as in fact using customers as ambassadors by writing positive reviews about their experience, about the product that they have bought. Similarly, you can use promotion differentiations by doing comparative advertising. In the 80s in America, government through FTC, Federal Trade Commission, actually encouraged companies to compare your brand with somebody else's brand. And I was quite surprised, why would they do that thing? But there was a hidden agenda, because when you make a comparative claim, you better be honest, otherwise your competitor can take you to the court. Since the government doesn't have the budget to enforce laws, they thought the competitors will enforce laws in each other in being honest about the claims that you make. But more often than not, you see generics or private labels in drugs. This is very common, comparing themselves with obviously the typical patented pharmaceutical products. Manufactured brands versus store brands, typical comparisons are done about how they are identical, there are no differences, and at the same time the price points are lower. Contest sales and promotions is another way to differentiate yourself. Some of these are so clever. I know that in the old days, Reader's Digest used to be in that category. They always had this one-time lottery before lotteries became popular. Today, there is a publishing house called Publishers Weekly. The prizes are unthinkable, like $1 million you win by strictly returning the mail. Most of them are really creating a database, capturing your name, address, and all that information, which they sell to other companies who would like to send you a direct mail advertisement, essentially. So they make money not on the newspaper or on the magazine, but in the databases they have. And Reader's Digest used to be one of the largest magazines, in fact, for many years till recently. These are the traditional 4 P's of marketing. And we have lots of practice and academic writings in this area. The newer areas are the process. Companies have taken a stand that the way you organize and the way you have a workflow that impacts the customer can make a difference. One of the easiest areas is to think about easy to do business with, taking all the friction out, essentially, all the hassle out. Online is the best way to do it. How easy it is for us to order anything, starting with books, of course, on Amazon, or ordering airline tickets now, everything online, compared to the old days where you had to call the travel agent called in fact the airline, you got a handwritten ticket, it took for days. Today I can do a worldwide booking travel anywhere internationally, even strictly online, and I get my ticket confirmation. And I can even have a ticket itself printed pretty much and get into the airport as well as into the airline by and large. And Google Maps is doing the same thing tremendously exciting how easy it is for me to find from origin to destination, and then the way they give you the map, MapQuest, Google, they all do a fantastic job, just easy to do business with. Second area is automatic bill payments. How do we make sure that utility bills, credit card payments are done automatically so that we don't have the hassle of doing that, and we don't have to pay late charges and credit ratings dropping and all that stuff pretty much. The third area growing significantly recently is mobile banking. I think this is a worldwide trend. Very interestingly, the trend began in emerging markets first because they don't have the personal computers. Personal computing is so expensive, even the laptops or the desktops. They went strictly to the mobile platforms, and they've done a lot more, and those platforms were digital. They're becoming broadband or internet based. So mobile banking. Kenya as a whole nation has the aspiration to have everybody, illiterate people, including the nomadic people who simply take their cows from one rainfall to another rainfall. They are basically across 3 nations that travel all the time. Masamari, for example, as a tribal thing, they will have a cell phone, and they will have a payment method without having a typical bank account, for example. So mobile phone is becoming my wallet now more and more. I don't need to carry a wallet anymore, and that is a phenomenon that can, through process, can make all the difference. Same thing is true about delivery, installation and maintenance. So heating and cooling people, they have to come home to install things. Home delivery is the same way, very much a paradigm shift. It may be easy to promise home delivery, it is very difficult to execute. So here is an example. You have Domino's Pizza offering the home delivery for pizza. Pizza Hut could not duplicate. McDonald's, which is a great company otherwise, cannot as yet figure out how to do reliable home delivery of McDonald's products, for example. So process differentiation makes procurement, which is purchase, payment, usage and disposal frictionless. But it does require an enormous investment in automation, especially in terms of information technology. Next area is to talk about people differentiation. There is some literature pretty much so in the services economy now, where people have talked about what makes difference are your people, your employees, representatives, could be franchisees, for example, or what I call the frontline employees. In fact, there are some great books titled, for example, Customer Comes Second. The argument is that if your employees are treated very well, then they will treat the customers they engage with equally with respect, with dignity, with love, with enthusiasm. So frontline employees is a key differentiator, and of course the best example we have in retailing is Nordstrom, where the employees are not only trained but empowered to make decisions on behalf of the customer without getting the approval from their immediate supervisors. Flight attendants again makes all the difference in airlines in the way they treat passengers when they are flying, especially in international flights. And rental clerks or sales clerks, for example, retail clerks is another key area. The retail in the store, I go out of my way to do shopping deliberately, once in a grocery store and once of course in a department store where sales clerks are there, to see the attitudes of the sales clerks. Are they really engaged? Are they really passionate? Do they care for me? It's not just the competence that matters, and that makes a differentiation in terms of the experience of the person. Of course, tech support is the other major area where people touch customers. So examples are Greek Squad, which is basically installation of consumer electronics and television sets as well as the computers, etc. That company is owned by Best Buy now. Medical device people, the same thing, the technicians who really come and do all the testing, they are your tech support. And of course, in industrial markets, people who install machines and build plants, it is not building the plants and the machinery, but it's maintenance over time that makes all the difference. more recently, especially with the rise of services economy, we have now found that relationship managers are very key in terms of people differentiation. So, for example, most of the wealth management companies who manage the assets of people, or account executives with a bank, portfolio managers, account executives, that relationship manager can make all the difference whether you want to do business with that company or not, or you want to switch your account. And sometimes the loyalty with the frontline person is so high that if that person goes from one wealth management company, let's say Merrill Lynch, to another wealth management company, let's say Morgan Stanley, they all move with that particular person who is the relationship manager. Between banks, I've seen this all the time pretty much. When the executive leaves the bank, he or she is able to take the customers. True for legal services, true for accounting services, etc. Which is the next area which says, in many of these cases, how do you become a trusted advisor? Right now, given the amount of pressure on price because of the economic recession, the level of automation that is taking place, I can find anything on the internet or doing a Google search. The traditional work that people used to do is becoming much more commoditized. Experts for hire is more transactional. How do you make them stay with you like clients for life, which I have a book actually called Clients for Life, has done exceptionally well. And the notion here is that the only way to have long-term relationship is to become the trusted advisor, where the relationship transcends beyond your expertise, essentially, where the client comes and wants to talk about all of his issues, her issues essentially. So, this is becoming very common now in investment banking, such as let's say Goldman Sachs and their competitors, accounting and legal services. This is the people as your differentiator, and very true in services, in retailing, and those cases that we talked about. The last area is, and my favorite is, differentiating yourself on the purpose of why you are in the business. Purpose driven business. With my colleague Raj Sisodia and myself, we have a book, one of the bestsellers books we have written, called Firms of Endearment, where companies that are driven by passion and purpose outperform financially companies that are strictly shareholder driven. And the examples of companies that we discovered are fascinating. They are all purpose driven rather than shareholder driven. That includes Whole Foods, which offers more organic and fresh foods, for example. That includes New Balance in the shoes, and they compete with Nike, but they are very firm about employee aspects, about doing things the right way in America. They seem to have a purpose driven thinking. And of course, Patagonia is very famous, starting the company strictly on that basis. This seems to bond with people more and more than the product, its benefits, its ingredients, its features, etc. The second related area is cause related marketing, associating yourself with a specific cause that resonates with the population, and therefore you get the positive image that that cause has in terms of emotional bonding. Most of these are more emotional bonding than strictly economic bonding with the customers by and large. There are many causes, poverty for example, literacy, eradication of diseases, and a company aligns by funding those causes to a typical what we would call NGOs. We have seen this thing happen with Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, which is primarily Microsoft money that he has allocated to his own foundation. True about Azim Premji Foundation in India, where Wipro, which is the IT company, a lot of the wealth he created is going after educating people in the poorest parts of India, for example. So, cause related marketing is another key area to differentiate yourself. And the third one, and more increasingly becoming mainstream, is sustainability. In other words, you are in the business not just to produce products at a competitive price and offer in a customer friendly manner, but you are also interested in solving societal problems in the process. One of them is of course carbon footprint. So, how do you make your operations carbon neutral, whether you are a logistics company like UPS, or you are in fact a Coca-Cola, or whether you are a typical large scale manufacturer such as for example somebody who is making consumer products for example. Whatever it is, how do you make sure that as you produce the carbon you are having ways to counterbalance that, pretty much what is called carbon neutral philosophy. And there is an organization which says that if you do this thing you can self report it in your annual reports and they verify that your report is right, called GRI, etc. Some companies have taken a stand that we need to educate the consumers for sustainability, that in many advanced countries consumption is excessive because it is so easy to access products, it is so easy to afford the products, etc., such as Kleenex or paper towels, disposables. So, Kimberly-Clark has taken a stand to educate the customers not to waste, or what is called recycle, reuse, reduce are the three platforms for consumption, and they actively engage, take some choices out. So, for example, we have now in flushing toilets, rather than having a 4-liter flushing content, all the new toilets will be 3 liters or more, less kind of a thing, and still do the cleaning that is necessary. And ultimately this drops down to what is called triple bottom line. United Nations has an agenda to say there is no some such thing as a trade off between people, which is employment, planet, which is the environment, and profit. That companies in existence for profit should be also able to achieve the people issues such as social problems of literacy, social problems of happiness of people, as well as in fact the planet. Ultimately it says doing well by doing good, as a phrase goes. So, let me summarize this. The essence of marketing is to create and sustain a differential advantage for the company and its offerings, which is products and services. There are 7 ways to create a differential advantage, as we just talked about. This includes the traditional 4 P's of marketing: product, place, price, and promotion. In addition, it includes process, people, and purpose. What I have found is that the 4 P's of marketing are pretty good to create a differential advantage. Remember, 4 P's of marketing got organized when we were just shifting from the agricultural society, which had no branded products. People made things at home, they did the value add, to manufacture branded products, and therefore it was more a notion of customer acquisition or differentiate yourself so that you become the choice of the customer, had nothing to do with retention of the customers. But today markets are mature. So, 4 P's of marketing are getting equalized essentially, and therefore to sustain the differential advantage you really need to focus more on process, and there are a lot of opportunities, processes. In fact, if you just think about how many applications are done for routine daily things we do in our lives that I can get on my iPad and on my iPhone, for example. I mean 100,000 is nothing. Companies can think from that viewpoint, how do I create my app process and my app that is there that makes very easy to do business with me. Of course, people is the next major area. I think people is another major differentiation to sustain your differential advantage. And the last one, and my most favorite, is the purpose. And I have seen that many companies like Procter & Gamble or Newell Rubbermaid, which is a company owns about 100 different brands, are now transforming their whole culture to say, rather than talk about product and its benefits to you, its ingredients, its features, functions, value, talk about how products enable the consumers to provide meaning in their life. Everybody is struggling for meaning in their life now, which is why the best selling books are Purpose-Driven Life, written by a preacher essentially. People are going back to faith-based views to say, I don't understand why I exist in my life. how can marketers link their products, their companies with that new evolution taking place as a way of creating a differential advantage. I think differentiation is a very key area of marketing, and as I mentioned earlier, really Ted Levitt, as we used to call him, probably was the most seminal thinker and a writer about differentiating anything in marketing. Thank you very much.